Initially, the outlook seemed bleak. The vibrant marine ecosystems along western Canada's coast had fallen silent, with vast kelp forests, once thriving underwater heavens for countless species, reduced to barren wastelands overrun by sea urchins. These spiny creatures devoured the last remnants of kelp, leaving fishermen with empty nets and scientists warning of an ecological collapse. It appeared the ocean itself was fading. Yet a bold and unconventional idea emerged. Could reintroducing sea otters, nearly eradicated by fur traders a century earlier, restore balance? When Canada released hundreds of these animals into the desolate waters, the results were beyond what anyone could have predicted. The coastal waters of British Columbia were once teeming with life, supported by sprawling kelp forests that provided food and shelter for fish, crabs, shellfish, and birds. These ecosystems sustained local communities through fishing and tourism. However, by the mid-20th century, a troubling shift occurred. The kelp began to vanish, replaced by dense populations of sea urchins that consumed the plants down to their roots, turning lush ocean floors into desolate urchin barrens. The root cause was the absence of sea otters, the urchin's primary predator, hunted to near extinction during the 18th and 19th centuries. Without otter to keep urchin numbers in check, the ecosystem spiraled out of balance. The consequences were devastating. Fish populations plummeted. Juvenile salmon lost critical habitats, and coastal communities faced economic hardship as fisheries collapsed. The shoreline, once protected by kelp from erosion, became increasingly vulnerable. Scientists feared the damage was irreversible, with the ocean's vitality fading into a silent, empty expanse. Desperate for a solution, conservationists proposed a daring plan: reintroduce sea otters to their former habitats. This became the cornerstone of one of Canada's most ambitious ecological restoration efforts, a high-stakes gamble to revive a dying sea. In the late 1960s, Canadian researchers and environmental officials launched a radical initiative to reverse the decline of Pacific coastal ecosystems. Their focus was the sea otter, a keystone species whose presence could spark a cascade of ecological recovery. The strategy, known as predator-led restoration, hinged on the idea that reintroducing otter would control urchin populations, allowing kelp to regrow and marine life to rebound. The plan involved careful selection of release sites with suitable conditions for otter populations to thrive, alongside monitoring programs and the creation of protected marine zones. This was a groundbreaking shift in conservation, aiming not just to halt damage but to actively rebuild a lost ecosystem. However, the approach was controversial, with uncertain outcomes and significant risks. The announcement of the sea otter reintroduction sparked immediate opposition. For shellfish harvesters, indigenous groups, and commercial fishers, otter were not saviors but threats to their livelihoods. Otter consumed vast amounts of shellfish, urchins, clams, crabs, and mussels that supported local economies. In areas where otter had been absent, these species had become vital resources. The prospect of a voracious predator returning raised fears of depleted stocks, with examples from Alaska fueling concerns. Some indigenous communities also felt sidelined, viewing the plan as an external imposition on their traditional territories. Tensions flared in places like Chesh Bay, where fishermen and harvesters demanded clearer communication and assurances that their economic and cultural needs would be addressed. Despite these objections, the government pressed forward, promising careful monitoring but facing a complex path ahead. Reintroducing sea otters was no simple task. Between 1969 and 1972, approximately 89 otter were relocated from Alaska to Vancouver Island's west coast, requiring meticulous coordination among scientists, veterinarians, and transport teams. The process was fraught with difficulties. Some otter died during transit, while others fled or failed to adapt to their new environment. Early results were mixed, with shellfish harvesters reporting immediate declines in catches near release sites. Yet subtle changes began to emerge in areas where otter persisted. Urchin populations started to decline, and patches of kelp reappeared. By the early 1980s, a small but stable otter population had taken root near Chesh Bay, hinting that the plan might succeed with time. By the late 1980s, clear signs of recovery emerged. Where otter thrived, urchin numbers dropped significantly, allowing kelp forests to regenerate. These underwater jungles, growing rapidly in the absence of grazers, provided shelter and food for fish, crabs, and other marine life. Divers reported vibrant scenes of color and activity in areas once described as lifeless. The return of kelp triggered a broader ecological revival. Juvenile fish found refuge. Seabirds and sea lions returned, and biodiversity flourished. This natural chain reaction, otter controlling urchins, kelp growing, and marine life rebounding, became a landmark success in conservation. As otter spread beyond initial release zones, similar recoveries occurred, transforming barren seascapes into thriving ecosystems. The return of kelp forests reshaped the entire coastline. Kelp stabilized shorelines against erosion, improved water quality by absorbing carbon dioxide, and supported a surge in fish populations, benefiting sustainable fisheries. By 2004, British Columbia's otter population exceeded 3,000, reaching over 5,600 by 2013, with similar recoveries in California and Alaska. A 2020 study from the University of British Columbia estimated that healthy otter populations generated $53 million annually through enhanced fish stocks, carbon storage, and ecotourism. Tourists flocked to see otter in their natural habitat, boosting local businesses. While shellfish losses amounted to roughly $7 million per year, the overall economic and ecological gains were substantial, creating a more resilient coastal economy. The reintroduction of sea otters along Canada's Pacific coast stands as a global exemplar of ecological restoration, illustrating how a keystone species can rejuvenate a degraded ecosystem. This success story, however, is not without ongoing challenges that demand vigilant management and innovative solutions to ensure its longevity. The return of sea otters has revitalized kelp forests and marine biodiversity. But the path forward requires addressing environmental, cultural, and climatic hurdles while building on the lessons learned to inspire similar efforts worldwide. One of the most pressing threats to this recovery is marine pollution, particularly oil spills. The 1989 Exxon Valdez disaster in Alaska serves as a stark reminder of the vulnerability of sea otters, whose fur loses its insulating properties when coated with oil, leading to hypothermia and mass mortality. Such events could devastate otter populations and undo decades of progress. To mitigate this risk, future conservation strategies must include robust safeguards such as stricter regulations on shipping routes near otter habitats, enhanced spill response protocols, and the designation of protected marine zones to minimize industrial impacts. These measures are critical to preserving the delicate balance restored by the otter's presence. Equally important is the need for collaborative management with indigenous communities whose cultural and economic ties to coastal resources run deep. The reintroduction initially sparked tensions, as some First Nations groups felt excluded from decision-making processes, viewing the project as an imposition on their traditional territories. Shellfish, a key resource for both otter and indigenous harvesters, became a point of contention. Emerging partnerships, however, offer hope. Co-management models that integrate traditional ecological knowledge with scientific approaches are gaining traction. These collaborations empower indigenous groups to monitor otter populations and manage marine resources, fostering trust and aligning conservation goals with cultural and food security priorities. Such inclusive frameworks are essential for the project's long-term success and could serve as a model for other regions balancing ecological restoration with community needs. Hot climate change poses another formidable challenge, with rising sea temperatures, shifting currents, and increasing ocean acidity threatening kelp forests and otter populations. Kelp, a cornerstone of the restored ecosystem, is sensitive to environmental changes, and disruptions could ripple through the food web. Scientists are actively studying how kelp forests can act as natural carbon sinks, absorbing carbon dioxide and mitigating ocean acidification. By quantifying this carbon storage capacity, researchers aim to integrate these ecosystems into broader climate adaptation strategies, positioning sea otters as allies in the fight against climate change. This dual role, ecological restoration and climate resilience, enhances the project's global relevance.